It's being that chameleon in those situations and not being a chameleon in a fake way, right? It's being your authentic self and meeting them where they are.
Your idea of self-care is to run for 6 days in a row.
Yes. That was even a big leap just to get to that piece. But what I think I learned throughout that was
like a full expression of yourself, right? Like encouraging
Absolutely.
people to do that. And I'm curious like how you approach that.
that's the most important piece is being able to make those connections. And so not focusing so much on, oh my gosh, is my hair done?
Right.
You know, what do I look like? What am I saying? But
Right.
it's, do I have a purpose?
I think it's terribly important to insist on individual values.
Learning Culture Podcast.
Initiative, creation, all these things which we value. It's now possible to make organizations on a larger scale than was ever possible before.
Learning Culture Podcast.
Teach people to analyze the kind of things that are said to them.
Courtney, welcome to the show.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
All right, so I'm very excited to talk to you about a lot of things today. But to start with, your idea of self-care is to run for 6 days in a row.
Yes.
What has your love of ultra marathon running taught you about yourself?
Yeah. So I think it's about accomplishing a feat that you may think is impossible. And so for me, it's that challenge of getting up in the morning, accomplishing a goal, feeling very good about it, going to bed the next day and doing it again for 6 days. And at the end, just saying, look at how these small individual goals like made up this one big, huge accomplishment that I was able to do. And I was able to push my body to do it. So, and it's also a time for me where I can sort of zone out and be in my head. And I always joke, I run with two women. So I'm in my mid 40s. I run with a woman who's 60 and a woman who's 65.
Wow.
And so I always say, I need you all to talk to me because I don't need to get into my head too much. But when I do it into my head, it's where I solve those problems. It's where I have that time to think, to really sort of do that, be in that meditative space.
Yep.
Because when you run for 120 miles, your body kind of gets used to how to run. And you can just then sort of focus on the problems or issues or successes that you've had and just really be in a zone to think about those. Yeah.
Was it always like that? Like, were you always driven like that? Or was that something that you've gradually developed?
I think I've gradually developed it. And I think just over the years, being able to recognize that I can accomplish some of these things that I see others doing that may be impossible. I woke up, my husband, if he were here, he would say that I woke up one day and was like, I'm going to run. And he was like, you don't run.
Really?
Like, really, you don't run. And I ran
yeah.
around the block. And then that turned into a 5K. And then that turned
That's
into,
amazing.
you know, and then it has escalated since.
So I think that's great. I didn't think we would get into this side of it, but that's such a, because I think my assumption was that you've been running since college days and like this has always been a thing you've done.
No, only like 10 years.
Yeah.
I was in my mid 30s when I started. Yeah.
And it just starts, like you said, with a run around the block.
Yeah.
And then pushing that further and for 1% improvement every time.
Yeah. Just it's literally just seeing if I can get like 5 seconds faster, or if I can do it without maybe like tweaking my ankle this time. It's just those small improvements. And for me, it was also a link to charity. Charity's huge. It's hugely important to me. And so my first big race that I ran, the marathon, I raised money for the Leukemia Lymphoma Society. So I was part of Team in Training.
Oh, cool.
And it was part of that community. It was doing something good for someone else. It was raising that money and incorporating that charity into my purpose for being there and doing that and showing up every Saturday morning in the rain and the cold and doing all the training.
Yeah. And the community part must be huge as well. Like it's a pretty insane thing to do, right?
It is.
So it's like a unique niche group of people that you're forming that community with.
It is, and that's what I tell people. They're like, well, you can just kind of go out and run on your own, right, and still do the same.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, it's the people that I love being with, and it doesn't matter if we're running fast or slow. It doesn't matter if we're walking. It doesn't, it's just getting that time to be with others and experience and sharing that experience is what I really enjoy. Yeah,
That's awesome.
Yeah, and trail runners are kind of a fun group.
Yeah.
I'm a road runner and a trail runner, and I will say trail runners are pretty amazing crazy, quirky folks, and they're just fun.
I didn't even know there was a distinction. Like what?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So think about like road runners, and this is based on Courtney, right? So this is just
your
my
experience.
experience. So this is road runners are, and I'm gonna say this, I'm type A. It's very type A. Like I got to get to my fastest. I'm PRing my personal record. I'm trying to get to my every time. Trail runners are just like, let's finish today. Let's, we can stop in the middle. We'll have a snack. We'll, sit and chat at an aid station. Then we'll get going and we'll support each other. And it's that huge level of support that I see in the trail running community. I need somebody to support me. I'm running 100 miles. So I need somebody to support me for 10 miles here, 15 miles here, 30 miles here. And people will literally raise their hands and say, what do you need me? What can I bring? Do you need Band-Aids? Like, what do you need?
Love
and
that.
it's like, there's a community around you to support you.
I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty great.
Yeah, you're getting me excited back to get back into the running. I've done the 2 marathons and then kind of just felt like my knees were going to give in at some point.
Yeah.
And you're getting me excited for it again. Okay, we can't talk about running the whole time. So let's go back to where you started your career in sales.
Yeah.
And we've got a sales advisor for Curious Lion here at Andy. We've been talking and thinking a lot about sales.
Yeah.
I'm curious what you've learned from that career that you're now using in your career in learning.
Yeah. So it was interesting. So my journey to get there was very like zigzaggy. Going into, if you were to ask my parents, what did Courtney want to be when she was little? It was Courtney wanted to be a doctor, a medical doctor. And when I was in college, it was like, I think maybe this is still what I want to be. I'm not sure. And literally I was sitting in the MCAT. I had done the prep courses. I had done everything. Sitting in the MCAT, I made a decision that I was not going to go to medical school. So I had to make a hard phone call that afternoon. Didn't have my MCAT scores, but I feel like I was going to do okay, all that. It was just literally the shift in my thinking that I need to do something else. And so that's when I got into sales because I didn't know what else to do.
Yeah.
And so that was even a big leap just to get to that piece. But what I think I learned throughout that was the resilience that I think you need as a salesperson. And I think that's a pretty typical answer, right? You get told no a lot and you have to keep going back. But I think the bigger thing besides that resilience is the connections to people. It's being that chameleon in those situations and not being a chameleon in a fake way, right? It's being your authentic self and meeting them where they are.
Yeah.
And having those discussions in a way that serves them. And, the beginning of my career it was to serve animals because I was in like vet pharmaceuticals. Yeah. And then, and then later on it was for people.
Yeah.
So,
those are great answers. And that I think gets to so when you and I talked last week, you were delivering a workshop, it was the whole week, right? I think
it was Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Yeah. To a bunch of scientists, right? Helping them with their, who are new to kind of corporate setting, corporate world, and helping them with presence, so showing up. And this idea of authentic self, I feel like is relevant here because we touched on this briefly, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this because when I hear the word executive presence, I think that's a myth. Like it's this, we've mythologized what executive presence is, this gravitas and communication and this and that. And it's made this external thing that we're all trying to somehow work towards. And it's often, in my experience, been taught like that, especially early in my career. That was my experience. And as I've come to grow, I guess, as a leader, realize that that's all kind of bullshit. Like, what really matters is emotional presence and how you show up. And yes, you're going to communicate and have presence and all that sort of stuff. That's going to come, but it has to come from within, the authentic self.
Yeah.
What do you say on that?
So it's interesting. So it was a leadership course that I was teaching, but in that vein, it really is. And I was thinking about this and reflecting, and I think for me, it's the professional presence or executive presence for me is the authentic physical impression in the workplace. So it's who you're bringing. And whether it be that emotional connection that you're making to others and yourself, or whether it is that gravitas and communication, I do think that there is a little bit of piece of how you're showing up, how you're communicating. And I think it might be unique because I view it as through the lens of a woman. Yeah. And there are certain times, circumstances, places that I've been where showing up with in sort of like these male qualities, being assertive or dominant in a room, did not serve me well. And so sort of learning how to do that in an authentic way for myself really served me, so I could make those connections. And I think that's the most important piece, is being able to make those connections. And so not focusing so much on, oh my gosh, is my hair done?
Right.
You know, what do I look like? What am I saying? But it's, do I have a purpose?
Yeah.
Do I have, you know, the reasons to believe of being there? Do I have, you know, that self-efficacy, that self-confidence to be in that room and communicate to others my story or my reasons why? And as a leader, it's very important, especially if you're working with these decision makers, and especially the scientists I was working with. Do they have the ability to communicate the reasons to move their project forward, to make the molecules of today the drugs of tomorrow? And so it's about those pieces. And you're right, it is about, you know, leaders now are very different, I think, than they've been in the past. But again, it goes back to that like authenticity piece. Absolutely.
And like a full expression of yourself, right? Like encouraging people to do that. And I'm curious, like, how you approach that. What were some of the things you shared last week that to kind of help people with this? Yeah.
So I think when you're in that space, it's telling your leadership story. And that's literally one of the first things we have them do. It's, why are you here? And how are you going to communicate that to those that you're leading? And so these scientists have maybe project team leads. They may not even have direct reports. So how are you communicating to that group that you're working with your reasons why? And they practice it a number of times. And it really isn't just so you could have a story to tell, but it's so you have, like, again, your personal purpose of being in that role or being in that situation. And that does give them the confidence to sort of step into those shoes if they need to be, quote, I'm using finger quotes here, the leader that they need to be.
Self-awareness is a big part of this, and often, you know, my experience, it's people in a work setting, especially when they don't all know each other, that's uncomfortable, right? To kind of do the work needed for that. How do you approach that with these groups?
Yeah, so I think it's just the ability for them to accept feedback. So we do a really cool activity within this workshop where you have a secret observer. And we talk about, even if you're not communicating, you're communicating in any given moment. People are watching you. People are observing. They're noticing. And is that impact positive? Is it negative? And not that you have to be self-conscious about that, but if you are in a leadership role, you're going to have more eyes on you. And so the secret observer is a very interesting process, because for 2.5 days, you are observing and you're being observed. And then you learn on that third day who's been observing you. And then you get to practice receiving feedback and giving feedback. With that person.
Yeah. Interesting.
And it's like, and I will tell you, I have been in the class, and I received my feedback, and, you know, somebody said, well, you're just so put together, and I was very, like, scared to talk to you, and you seem just like one of those people. And I was like, oh my gosh, what does that mean? You know? And so I think it's just like recognizing facial expressions and smiling and being welcoming to people. And because I never want to put anybody off, but I think it was really excellent feedback for me to receive. Totally, because I want to be approachable. I want, you know, that's, again, going back to your authentic self. Like, how can I show up and be the person?
Exactly. That's a gift. That's a gift to give people. Yeah.
And it's a very easy activity that you can do.
Yeah, I love that. What are some of the other attributes that you prioritize in these programs? Like, and like, have you seen as a need for people to develop?
I think in any leadership program, there has to be the components of feedback, the components of coaching, and then also creating psychological safety. And within that psychological safety, it's social contracting. How do we work together as a group? And so it makes it very clear, like, this is what I expect of you, this is what you expect of me, and then conforming to that within that space, and then identifying if you're not, and then how do you shift back, and then also just identifying roles and responsibilities. So these are the types of things that we're reviewing with people. We have these models and ability to practice and give like I said, feedback, and then creating these contracting situations within little pods in this leadership course.
Yeah.
So they get the theory behind all of these, like the why, and then they get to put into practical application, which from a learning perspective is the most important thing, because if you're not putting it into practice, you're going to walk out and forget it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Do you get ongoing work with people? Do you get to see that journey kind of unfold over months?
Mm-hmm. So as a facilitator, I get to start the journey with them. It's actually a 3-month journey. It used to be 9. We've shortened it to a 3-month journey. We get to meet them sort of on this welcome call. We interact with them through a community within the team's environment, which is nice. So you're creating that cohort community. You then spend 3 full days with them, which is a lot longer than people who are even in a corporate environment typically spend with like one group.
Yep.
I mean, and it's 8:30 to 6.
Yeah, it's like
3 days. It's a long time. And so we get that time to spend with them. It's truly as a gift to meet all these great people that work within my company. And then we do a journey after for 4 weeks where we get to follow them. They're doing some like leadership experiments, and then we get to like host this final call where they get their certification, which is really fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Tell me more about those leadership experiments.
Yeah. So they get to sort of pick and choose. It's like choose your own path.
Yeah.
By applying some of the topics that we're working with, inside the course. So do you have this situation in your within your team? Do you need to communicate with somebody? Do you need to provide feedback? Do you sort of need a do-over with somebody, essentially?
Yeah.
Then they can create this experiment and then try it out, and they have these really cool pods that they can go to get feedback,
That's awesome.
and kind of share, and then come back and we get to interact with them as well and see sort of how the experiments go.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah.
A lot of great tips here for people listening.
Yeah.
Let's change to your doctorate. So you recently completed, what you've alluded to. You've got quite a few projects on the go. You completed a doctorate and a master's
at the same time.
Yeah. And congrats
Thank
again
you.
on that. You just had graduation and all of that.
I did.
It was an organizational change in leadership with a particular focus on women in leadership in healthcare as well. So. There's a really interesting, we touched on this, the concept of masculine and feminine leadership qualities, or as you called it, agentic and communal. Masculine, feminine, agentic, communal. Let's just start with what is that? What does it mean what is a masculine leadership quality and a feminine leadership quality, and how do they show up in men and women alike?
Yeah, so a lot of my research was based on Alice Eagley and Linda Carley's research, and it's, if anybody wants to take a look at the book, it's called Through the Labyrinth: The Truth About How Women Become Leaders. And so within this book they talk about the agentic and the communal leadership qualities. And agentic qualities are really more about assertion and control within leadership. So for example, it's being a leader, essentially just the word leader, right? Which is crazy.
It is crazy. Yeah.
And being ambitious, being determined, or being dynamic. And then being communal is concern with the compassionate. So what you would think of how you would treat others. So being a supporter, being warm, being helpful, understanding those types of behaviors.
Yeah. And these are qualities that are present in, it's not like a male female thing, but let's just talk about, because that is interesting. Leadership, like leading, is put as an agentic.
Yeah.
Right. And yet we're talking about female leaders, right? And so, I guess maybe like, what is that like as a woman, that there are like masculine and feminine qualities, and that there's almost this like inference that is the masculine one is the leadership one. Yeah. Right. Like how do you reconcile that?
Yeah. So this is what my research was based on. Yeah. So it's based on Bandura's social cognitive theory. So look, it's how the environment impacts your belief in yourself and your personal behaviors. So it's like this triadic reciprocity. And if you think about traditional Western leadership, it's been that white male. And specifically in healthcare, that's what I've had exposure to. And again, this is through Courtney's lens, and then also the 9 women that participated in my study. But that's what I've typically seen within the healthcare organizations that I've worked for. That's it. And so you start seeing the qualities that they possess working and getting them promoted. So do I need to be aggressive? Do I need to be determined? Do I need to be a leader in these situations to get me to where I need to be? And so you start to like focus on these kind of stereotypical qualities that you would think of as leadership.
Yeah.
And that's just because of the environment that you're working in. And so it may be different in other scenarios, but for me specifically, my experience and the women that I interviewed, when I actually interviewed them, those are the type of qualities that they focused on. So my hypothesis is that they would see leadership qualities as being more important or strong. I gave them a quantitative quiz as well. And communal qualities is kind of being neutral. So the baseline was either like weak, neutral, or strong association. And I was like, well, the women, because of the positions they're in, VPs, C-level, I think my assumption is that they're going to say, okay, I need to be more male-like or agentic. And that communal qualities would not be as important. What I found is when they took the actual implicit association test, it was actually a test based on that. They, by far and away, saw the communal qualities as being important.
Really?
So being supportive, helpful, all of these things on average scores were like way above the other ones, except for being a leader and being determined.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
All the others, and I think it was like 14 different areas I looked at.
Yeah.
It was the other 5 ranked very low.
Okay, so, and for people listening who we talked about this, these were 9, you interviewed 9 very successful, very highly ranked female leaders.
Yes,
right?
Within Fortune and Global 500 healthcare companies.
Yeah. So
they were C-level or C-level -1 level, -2 levels, or -3.
Right.
So we call them lots of different things. Heads, VPs, executive VPs, whatever, but that was my determination.
Yeah, and then, and so, okay, these communal qualities came out as really strong. Can you say more about the leadership and a leader and determined part? Like what? So they were saying those were.
So that was when they actually took the survey. They ranked those as very strong, and important to them.
To that, yeah.
To them,
okay.
absolutely.
Along with the communal.
Along with
ones.
all the other communal qualities,
And I'm wondering if how much of a reflection of our times this is also pointing towards, right? Like the idea of compassion, support, understanding as qualities that are now being recognized as being more important, right? Like, what did you think about that?
Yeah, and I think had I done the same study 10 years ago, I may have had a different result. But I do think you're right. And we talked about it at the very beginning. It circles, again, back to that authenticity and seeing in your environment leaders succeed by not being the normal. Or what you would perceive as the normal. So now I'm seeing, whether I'm a male or a female, however I identify, I'm seeing people who are compassionate, supportive, maybe not as loud as I would expect, maybe introverted, quiet, succeeding into these roles. And I start seeing myself in that and saying, oh, okay, now I can show these. Now I can demonstrate these. Now I can be authentic in how I lead. And it's okay.
Yeah, so as you're reflecting on that research now and you get to practice this on a day-to-day basis, like what are some of those takeaways that you're now running with?
Yeah, and I think it was something I learned from a leader early on in my career. I had an interview once and I was told by someone else that the interviewer, like, this is what they really want, Courtney. They want to see you be strong and assertive. You're going into a leadership role and you need to kind of, put it to them. And so I did that. And then the woman that was the other interviewer called me after and she's like, I have no idea what I just saw, Courtney. That wasn't you at all.
Who was that?
Who was that?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I thought that's what they wanted. And she was like, no, we wanted you to be you.
Yeah.
And so I think that really it's just so important now as we even go through these leadership courses and just like being repetitive, even if it's not the culture, and we said this a lot last week, even if it's not the culture of where you work, within your individual pods, within your individual teams, business units, whatever that might be, you be the change. Don't be afraid to be that role model because, again, someone's watching you. And we want to make sure the culture is one of diversity, inclusion, being able to speak up, having that psychologically safe environment to be the leader that they were tapped for a reason or they, decided to be in this role for a reason. So fulfill that. Yeah.
Why is it so hard to just be yourself?
I think you get into these situations where potentially you have someone, your boss or their boss, not giving you the feedback, not, having that positive reinforcement of, this is what I'm seeing you do well, keep doing this.
Yeah.
It's that feedback cycle of, this is what I see wrong, you need to fix it, or not even having development discussions. And so you're just kind of throwing things out there to see if they're working.
Yeah.
And sometimes the things that are recognized are the things that are not authentic.
Yeah.
And so you just sort of have that repetitive behavior.
Yeah, and you double down on something that's not authentic to you. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and so then you're full of anxiety all the time. So this is why it's so important to offer coaching and feedback to those you work with.
Yeah. That's great. Self-efficacy is a big part of this and was in your research a lot. For those listening, what is self-efficacy? And then we can talk a little bit about how it plays in here, because I think it's also such a key concept with any leadership program.
Yeah, it is. So a definition is how you feel about your ability to succeed in different situations, which is different from self-esteem, which is respect for your own value and worth.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
So are you able to succeed? And so one of the other really cool surveys that I gave to my women was this 8 questions, and it's the new generalized self-efficacy scale. It's a valid, reliable scale. And it was 1 out of 5. This is not important. This is very important. And one of the questions is, one of the rating scales is, I am confident that I can perform effectively on many different tasks. So, like I said, 8 items women had to rate themselves. And every single woman in my survey gave themselves a 5 in that. My hypothesis is that overall, I was like, these are above average people. They're high level leaders. If a 3 is any Joe off the street, they're going to be a 4, right? Not true.
Yeah.
These women scored
5.
between 4.56 and 5 on every single item. Another item, just for the listeners, I believe that I can succeed at most any endeavor to which I set my mind. So things like that, that's powerful.
That is powerful.
Thinking, and that was a 4.89 out of 5.
Yeah.
That was the average of the women.
Yeah.
I can succeed at most any endeavor.
Yeah.
That's true belief in oneself.
Yeah. And in this context of something we've talked about in every episode we've done on this couch is the idea of navigating through change and responding to change and dealing with that. And this self-efficacy that's what I'm saying, why it's such a key part of it, right?
Totally.
What is it like? How did these women develop that, I guess?
So I think it's just the mentors that they had. We talked a lot about mentorship and sponsorship inside the interviews. So I had these survey instruments, and then, like I said, I also had these hour-long interviews. And so it was the support that the women were getting by both men and women within their organizations to reinforce their abilities to do these jobs. And again, I see this in you. I know you can do this. If you're feeling uncomfortable, come to me. So it's going back to everything we've talked about today, circling back.
Yeah.
Psychologically safe environment.
Yeah.
It's about coaching and it's about feedback. And these women
Yeah.
were constant receivers of this, and they were able to kind of conquer their organizations and be these amazing leaders that they are. Yeah.
I love that you call out the role of the other.
Yeah.
Right, others in helping you develop that self-efficacy, because if it's like just a self-developed thing, then there's like a delusional aspect to it as well, right? Like you have to almost have it validated by others. And it reminds me of an exercise that we run, but there's actually which I based on an exercise I read and tried myself, which is, anybody listening can try this, is you message a few of your friends and you ask them, what is a story, or when was a time where you saw me at my best?
Yeah.
Right. And you wait for those responses to come in. And I did this, and it is unbelievable, like how validating that is. And also it almost like there were a couple that pointed out things that I didn't fully appreciate as even being like noteworthy.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that is me, but I didn't realize like anybody noticed it. It's that type of activity. And now, so you can do that in a leadership program by having people share like one thing about each other that they admire at work or something, right? The effect on that person who's receiving those compliments or stories or feedback, it's phenomenal. And this is how you boost self-efficacy.
Absolutely. Incorporated into our leadership program are these 360. And so it's getting that feedback from direct reports or from people that you're working with in project teams and from your boss.
Yeah.
And it is part of that. what is my impact on the team? What is my impact in your daily work? And seeing those results. Sometimes they might be hard to see, but again, it's like it's holding that mirror up and just saying, okay, this is where I am now. It's okay. I'm a human.
Yeah.
I'm not perfect. I can be better tomorrow.
Yeah. All about the authentic expression of self.
Exactly.
It takes a village to do anything.
It does.
Right? Running ultra marathons, running leadership programs. We have ours are cohort based for that reason. You know, we learn best from each other. You specifically mentioned your study group.
Yeah.
And the role they play. Can you talk to that and kind of what you learned about the role of others in helping you achieve what you did?
So I had never had study groups when I was an undergrad, and even at the beginning of my master's, I didn't have a study group. And I found this group when I started my doctoral journey. And it was literally this one person who was like, do you want to be in a study group? And I was like, sure, I like people. Let's do it. And it's just these phenomenal individuals who are totally committed to, I mean, of course we all wanted to like succeed in the program and get good grades and all that thing, but it's like, what are we learning? How can we digest all of this information? How can we apply it every day? How can we challenge each other? And I'm in Dallas. The people in my study group were in Oregon, California. I mean, so I was always working on Pacific time, which was fine. I loved it. And they're just like, they're like my family. And I know 1000% I could not have done it without them. And they come from wildly different areas, industries, areas of focus and expertise. And I literally, they're in my dedication for my dissertation. The sash that I wore at graduation, you couldn't see because it was the back. I wrote their names and I said thank you to these individuals, to Sean, Liz, Jennifer, and Dave. I had my husband on there too. They were my journey. And I literally today when I got done speaking, I texted them and I was like, the room was crowded and, they were turning people away and they all were like, yay. Even after graduation, we're still supporting each other. And they're an amazing group of people.
I love that you used the word journey as well, because I have this theory of group-based learning. There's two types of groups though in group-based learning, which there's a destination group and a journey group. So the destination group are the people that have done the thing you're trying to do, right? So have set the curriculum, shown the 10 steps to get there, whatever. And that is valuable. You need to be able to see that. But if there are 10 steps to get there and you're on step 2, you just need to get to step 3. That's all you can think about, right? And it's the journey group, which are people that are also on step 2 or maybe step 3 or step 1. Like they're in that, like about to take the step. And that's the group you learn the most from all the time, every day.
It is. And that was true about, I love that you said that, because it was true about any kind of readings that we would do, application to, assignments that we were, even our dissertations, we were all in different places. And so when someone would kind of move ahead, we'd be like, okay, talk to us about how you did that. What was your process? And they'd be like, okay, I'm going to share with you. Here's what I did. You can see it. You can, you can edit my work, like help me. And so it was really just that cooperative learning environment that we were able to sort of push and pull and learn and challenge each other.
It's an incredible phenomenon, I think.
It's like nothing I've ever experienced in my career or like personally.
It's amazing.
Incredibly fulfilling.
Yeah, totally, right? And I guess I hadn't thought of this question now, but like, how do you seek that out now, right? This is like an open question. Like, how do you get more of that?
That's like, if I could find that group at work, and that's what Julie is.
You
know what I mean? So Julie, the woman that I did the co-facilitating with today.
Another podcast guest. Some people check out that episode.
Yeah, Julie McGovern. We just stumbled upon each other at work. We've never worked together.
Really?
And on a team. No. We just had this like mutual love for learning, this passion for delivering these like really cool learning opportunities to individuals. We just connected, and it was that mutual support. It was that I'm going to be vulnerable with you for a minute. And she'd be like, okay, that's great. I'm going to be vulnerable with you. Here's where I think I might have failed. I'm like, okay, cool. Let's do this together. Again, it was that mutual feedback. It was that coaching piece. It was that safe environment where we could just be ourselves and play and have fun.
Oh, I like
and
play.
So if I could find like, more
Julies.
of those. More Julies.
I think so much, like going back to the self-expression and being yourself, like that is what you brought you and Julie together almost, right? Like you had to, it is full circle all the time, like going back to just being open, honest, vulnerable, all these things.
Yeah. It's this is who I am. Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Because I'm totally cool with who you are too.
Yeah.
Let's work together because we complement each other.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're on the same journey.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So last question, speaking of your journey, what's next for Courtney? Where are you headed? Where do you want to head? And what value do you want to take into that?
Yeah, so I've spent 4 years digging very deep into learning theory, motivation, diversity, equity, and inclusion practices, underrepresentation of women in leadership. And I really want to be able to give back some of that to my organization. And so how I can transfer my learning into practice. And that's why I did the program that I did. I didn't want to do a PhD. I wanted to do an EDD because of that. I wanted to practice what I was learning in the moment and not kind of live in theory.
Yeah.
Because I'm a doer.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to do next. I want to contribute more to my organization from a very strategic level. How can I bring these learners together in this environment to make sure that we're upskilling for the future? Are we using AI for that? You know, what tools are we using, which is where ATD comes in as well, right?
Yeah.
But that's what really drives me. You know, I led a sales team years ago, and I would love to get into sort of that bigger picture strategy piece. So
That's awesome. Well, good luck on that journey.
Thank you.
And thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
Hello. I hope you enjoyed that episode. It's Andrew again with a quick message. If you'd like to support the show, the best way to do that is to leave us ratings and reviews where you listened. If you're on YouTube, hit the like and subscribe buttons and feel free to leave a comment. We love hearing from our listeners and viewers. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, please take the time to give us a rating and leave a review. Once again, we love hearing from our loyal listeners. If you're listening to this on Spotify, please hit the follow button to make sure that you don't miss new episodes as they come out. See you next week for another episode of the Learning Culture Podcast. Thank you for listening.